Hi, everybody. Welcome officially. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading of literary fiction. We're going to be hearing from Katherine Elberfeld, author of An Umbrella Made for a Man, a novel released on July 8th. Thomas Penn Johnson, author of Cora and Martha and Other Stories, which is releasing tomorrow on July 15th. And Gal Podjarny, author of Until the Walls Come Down, a novel which is releasing next week on July 22nd. All three authors' books can be purchased from online retailers as well as from select bookstores. Of course, you can also find the books on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/books. And I'll put the links to each book directly straight in the chat for you so you can check those out. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for audience questions. So if you think of a question for one or more of our authors, you can just type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. Please do stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to use the chat for praise and comments in addition to questions. One last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so you can submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to support Katie, Thomas, and Gal today. We're going to be starting off with our first reader, who is Katie Elberfeld. Katie's background as an author and Episcopal priest drive the story in her most recent book, An Umbrella Made for a Man. In addition to advanced degrees in writing, Katie holds a master's in divinity from Virginia Theological Seminary. She was ordained to the priesthood in 1994. Her previous books are The Lady of the House, Make Yourselves at Home, In the Midst of Sunflowers, To Speak of Love, and Jordan to Jerusalem. Katie grew up in Gainesville, Georgia, and now lives in nearby Marietta. She's got 2 grown sons, is a Far Side aficionado, and cannot live without pickleball. Today, we're going to be hearing from her we're going to be hearing Katie read from An Umbrella Made for a Man. In the 1990s, strong-willed Irene Maxwell embarks on her path toward ordination as an Episcopal priest, confident in her calling but unprepared for the hidden obstacles she'll face. During a job interview with the dean of a cathedral conducted uncomfortably in his car, he asks Irene questions only to interrupt her responses and force her into silence. An Umbrella Made for a Man not only follows Irene's personal struggles, but also explores the broader question of why human beings inflict harm on each other. Let's now welcome Katie to hear from the story now.
Thanks, Hayla. I appreciate it. I'm so grateful to you for providing us with this opportunity, and it's so good to see all these faces out there. So I am going to be reading from the chapter called The Job Interview, which Hayla referenced when she was telling you about the book. When the protagonist, Irene, got to the city where she was going to meet with the dean of the cathedral, one of his lay leaders from the cathedral picked her up at the airport and took her to a little green bungalow, which is where a group of Anglican nuns lived. And she had been told that she was going to be spending the weekend at their house. So this scene starts when she goes up the front porch, rings the doorbell. After a few moments, a sister opened the door and, unsmiling, asked her what she wanted. Irene thought that maybe it was obvious that she wanted a room, considering that she was carrying a suitcase and had no doubt by this time achieved that haggard look that all women love when they're traveling. But again, she tried to appear calm, patient, at ease. They told me at the cathedral that I would be staying with you all this weekend, Irene said, looking at the nun for a hint of humor, warmth. Oh, you're the one, the sister replied. All right, then, come on in. I'm on my way out, but I can show you your room if we hurry. Following the nun up the stairs to the second floor, Irene said, "My name is Irene Maxwell. I'm here to visit the cathedral this weekend." Her hostess did not respond. The nun was a couple of steps above Irene so that her rear end was close up in Irene's face. The long black cloth of her habit swished from side to side as she continued up the stairs, and Irene could see with each step the heels of the shiny, black, squared off, clunky men's shoes the nun was wearing. Irene wondered what other clothes she was wearing that were actually made for men. She almost laughed out loud at the thought of this silent figure in Y-front briefs and a hair shirt for a bra. When they got to the top of the stairs, the still unnamed sister pointed to a room at the end of the hall and said, "You'll be staying down there. It's ready for you. The bathroom is across the hall from your room. There's a number by the phone you can call us on if you need anything, or you can come downstairs, to see if you can find anybody." "Thank you," Irene said, this time a bit more uncertainly, as the reality of the weekend began to become clearer in her mind. "And what is your name, just in case I need to find you?" "It's Julia." The nun's face, wrapped tight in the white headband of her habit, wrapped tight as if bound by a winding sheet, remained immovable, while she stared at Irene with eyes like sapphires gone dead, robbed of their stars. When Irene started to leave the house for dinner with the dean, whose name was Roy, it had begun to rain. She had left her small lime green umbrella upstairs in her suitcase, and as Roy was due to pick her up soon, she decided to borrow one of the long black umbrellas telescoped and stored in the brass stand next to the front door. She pulled one out of the stand, its cloth wound securely around its pole and snapped in place, the handle ending in an oversized, polished wooden duck's head with shiny green plastic eyes. Irene went out on the porch and opened the umbrella. Released from its at-rest position, it was enormous, expansive, as large an umbrella as spectators take to football games, with hard ribs arcing out from the pole. Yep, an umbrella made for a man. Now we're going to go deeper into the chapter and get to the crux of it. As Hala also mentioned, this interview took place in the dean's car, which he insisted on, so that they could simultaneously sightsee. And they were in such a rush that they'd had to go through the drive-through window of a fast food restaurant to get their lunch. So they were in the car conducting the official interview, sightseeing, and eating lunch. "So, Irene," Roy said as he finished his hamburger, "tell me why you want to come work for me." They had left the city limits and were starting to climb up the foothills. Irene's unfinished lunch was in a bag on the car floor next to her feet. Roy wiped his mouth with a paper napkin and looked over at her, eyebrows raised. "Well, as I told you on the phone when we first discussed my coming out here to meet with you, I am passionate about—" Roy had reached across the seat and was poking her left leg, her quadriceps, poking her leg above the knee with his right index finger held rigid. Poke, 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 like the hard pointed bill of a ravenous woodpecker pecking at a tree, hunting down grubs, bugs to devour, vehemently pecking at the wood, desperate to find the delicate morsel hidden away beyond the bark. "Look over there. See that waterfall? That's why I brought you out here. I wanted you to see this spectacular scenery. Isn't it amazing?" Before Irene could respond, Roy continued, "I think there's a turnoff up here somewhere where we can get out and you can get a better view. Did you bring your camera? You might want to take some pictures." I think I'd rather just keep driving, if you don't mind, Irene responded, moving over to the right as far as the seatbelt would let her go. In fact, I think we should turn around soon because I have a few things to pack before I go to the airport. Roy looked quickly over at her, frowning. His face flushed as if reacting to some quickened emotion within him, and he started to speak. Then he looked back again at the road. The red in his face receded, and he answered her calmly, "Okay, I guess you're right. Let's go on with the interview then." As he found a place to turn around and start back toward what Irene hoped would be the nun's house, the beginning of her trip home, Roy asked her to continue telling him why she wanted to work at the cathedral. Every time she started to answer one of his questions, that right index finger, crooked, flew over to her side of the car and poked her leg again. Again and again, Roy interrupting her to have her look at some new view, a cloud shadow on the mountain's shank, a tiny group of houses in the valley below the road, the hawks circling on the thermals high above. Irene would start to talk, and the poking would start back up. Irene talking, poking, talking, poking, talking, poking, talking, poking, talking, poking, until they had finally returned to town and were headed toward the little green bungalow. For the rest of her life, Irene could not fill in the memory pieces of what happened between the time she got out of Roy's car at the nun's house and when she was back in his car at the airport, telling him goodbye. And this chapter ends with Irene on the airplane in her seat, waiting to take off for home. The indigo sky burned dark through the airplane window as Irene waited to take off for home. Images, thoughts, flashes of the weekend swirled through her mind as she looked out at the darkening day. The blue lights on the airport runways already lit up for the night. No way she could process the experience at the cathedral and the nun's bungalow. No way she could make sense of it at this point. Not yet. But she knew what she had to do, and she had to do it the minute they reached 10,000 feet. She had to start calling home. She had to talk to her children, to her nanny, to her parents. She couldn't wait until she actually physically got home to connect with them. She would have to use the phone on the seat in front of her to start making the calls. And she would just have to pay whatever it cost. Once she was allowed to use the phone, she started in on the calls, and when she didn't reach one person, she simply punched in the next number. She talked for most of the flight home, and by the time they landed, she had racked up $150 in charges. But she didn't care. She just did not care.
Thank you so much, Katie, for that reading. I think it was palpable to everyone, I would guess, based on my own response, that it's palpable how uncomfortable and frustrating that was. So thank you for that introduction.
Thank you.
Of course. Reading next today is Thomas Penn Johnson. Thomas was born in 1943 in Greensboro, North Carolina. In 1969, he worked as a caseworker for the Cook County Department of Public Aid, Children's Division. From 1974 to 1981, he resided in Valparaiso, Indiana, and he holds an MA in English from UNCG from 1968, an MA in History from Wake Forest University in 1982, and he also did graduate study in English literature at Syracuse University. In 1992, Thomas published a collection of poems entitled If Rainbows Promise Not in Vain. In 2009, he retired from then Edison State College in Fort Myers, Florida, after serving for 26 years as an instructor of English and humanities. In 2024, he published the full-length play entitled Amias. Spanning from the Civil War to the near present, Cora and Martha and Other Stories, Thomas's latest publication, follows Black protagonists from all walks of life. yard children, urban bootleggers, domestic servants, barbers, seminarians, teachers, soldiers, truck drivers, and even fairies in a fairy tale. Set in a range of societies, these stories explore the universal struggle between good and evil. Thomas, take it away.
Thank you. And thank you, Katie. I very much enjoyed your reading. Uh, to minimize the spoiler effect, I'm going to read from one story only, one of the 16 stories in the volume. And I'll read the beginning of the story, a partial reading. I'm very, very keen on avoiding the spoiler effect. I respect readers very much and their reading experience, so I'm going to try to not spoil things. Um, the story is entitled Angeline Smith Was Retiring. Angeline Smith was retiring at the end of the school year, so Nell Foley, Dunbar High School's next most senior English teacher, was chairing the English department's last meeting before graduation. Nell had a jaw that set like the metal hull of a battleship whenever she had serious words to say. Her speaking and teaching style impressed observers as a cross between the elegant sophistication of T.S. Eliot's writing and the vibrato of a revivalist tent preacher. As a teacher, the woman was a veritable force of nature. Angeline was leaving her beloved English department in the hands of the most competent and revered English teacher she had ever known. But the agenda of today's meeting would engage the faculty in thorny issues and some of the weightiest words ever bandied about in the halls of Dunbar High. And the mood of the agenda was evident in Nell Foley's sober demeanor when the 7 Dunbar English teachers, all women, arrived for their meeting in Angeline's classroom on the first floor of Dunbar's main building. Ma Jenkins of the history department was also retiring at graduation. The retirement of the last 2 teachers who had joined the original faculty when the school was founded in 1928 was recognized by the faculty as well as the community that Dunbar High served to be a harbinger of significant change. Far-reaching change, it came to be revealed when Nell Foley brought forward her agenda. The classroom windows were opened wide, letting the glorious smells and sounds of a Piedmont spring pour in, the ubiquitous smells of newly blossoming honeysuckle and blooming trees, and the alluring sounds of melodious duets intoned by amorous cardinals flitting about. 5 of the 7 teachers were happily married. One was divorced, but in hot pursuit of a new doctor in town, and one, Luvonia, was engaged to be married in June. The thing was, all of them were elegantly dressed foxes, and they knew it and reveled in it, and the warmth of the season had made them strut in the halls more jauntily and be uncharacteristically frisky, even to the point of flirting with certain cute boys in their classes. Something in the influence of spring in the Piedmont augments the joy of life to such a degree that infatuated inhabitants become dauntless in all things. Nell began the meeting with an homage to Angeline that made all the ladies cry. Angeline Smith was genuinely beloved by all, students, and faculty, including the principal, who everybody referred to as Big John, always a respectful sobriquet. Then followed Nell's announcement of new business. As you know, next year we have a new superintendent, Mr. Weaver, who apparently is serious about integrating city schools by trying something that hasn't been done before. For next year, he wants to assign 6 white teachers to Dunbar and 6 Dunbar teachers to the 2 white high schools, 2 English teachers, 2 history teachers, 1 science teacher, and 1 math teacher. Big John will make the final decision, but he wants to know what we recommend. What 2 teachers from our department will be leaving us next year? So, colleagues, now that you've heard the question, what's your pleasure? By the way, I should advise everybody from the get, as the boys and girls say, that I came to Dunbar 3 years after it started, and I have no intention of leaving, not after all these years. So, what's your pleasure? Elbows thudded on desk, torsos stiffened, and audible deep breaths punctuated the air. A bolt out of the blue, Nell's announcement certainly seemed, but the surprised teachers were more curious than alarmed. For integration was something that each of the 7 teachers had been advocating for since the Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education. Nell's announcement made clear to the English department of Dunbar High School that that day was truly the day it first began, the desegregation of the city's public schools. Now a retiree, ineligible for any assignment, Angeline felt at liberty to speak up right away about what was uppermost on her mind. After last year, I don't think our school can afford to lose a second grant this year. I say we have to keep Mrs. Grant right where she is. She was alluding to the sudden death last year of Mr. Grant, the only chemistry teacher Dunbar had ever had, whose wife was the last of that old phalanx of pedagogues who taught both English and math. For 30 years, up until last year, the Grants were the only married couple to teach at Dunbar. Over the years, everybody, even the colleagues who were her dearest friends, called her Mrs. Grant as a schoolhouse convenience and as a matter of respect for her marriage to an honorable teacher who was universally admired by Dunbar High graduates and residents of Lincoln Grove, the neighborhood where the school stands to this day. No one disagreed with Angeline, so Nell put forth a question she felt was too important not to be considered. While we are at it, what do you suppose will become of the Dunbar thespians if Wells is assigned somewhere else? What about dramatics at this institution? The fall production, the 1 acts in the spring, the dramatics class, will they survive if Wells is gone? I'll tell you what will happen, argued Livonia. We'll lose Night of January 16th and The Willow and I and Mulatto and Green Pastures and all those packed houses Well brings here every fall. Hell, Wells is the Dunbar Thespians. You know it. The town knows it. and all of them college professors around the state who send their drama students over here to watch Wells do what she does, they know it. Angeline, whose students were always enthralled with the plays she taught, regarded the Dunbar Thespians as a bulwark of fine art and a priceless community asset. She could not resist observing. And if we let them send some white drama major in here, we'll wind up with productions of Oklahoma and Brigadoon and God help us, Showboat. Well, even there, said Rosa, the teacher with the least seniority in the department, we lose. Because look at what Wells did with Bell Book and Candle, with Shirley, what's her name, and those two boys, Cheek and Harold, what's his name? Oh, that Harold, goodness me, Mr. Heartthrob. Recovering her composure, she quickly added, and the Thespians, Arsenic and Old Lace last year was the funniest version of the play I've ever seen. I think I'll stop there. I don't know how many minutes I use, but I'll stop there because I'm finishing up with Mrs. Wells, and we'll go on and we'll be near the spoiler alert, and I'll stop there. The title of the story, Angeline Smith was retired.
Thank you very much for that reading, Thomas, and thank you for preserving the surprises, the spoilers for us, so we can explore them when I'm sure everyone will check out the book. So in the meantime, our final reader for today is Gal Podjarny. Gal was born and raised in Israel/Palestine and has made homes in Canada and the UK. She draws from these diverse cultural landscapes to examine how social forces shape personal narratives and relationships. Her writing, including the short story collection Human Fragments and contributions to various anthologies, captures these intersections of identity and community. From her home in London, she continues this exploration through her blog at galpod.com and her work with the Disrupt Foundation. This is her first novel. And exploring questions of ownership and belonging, this novel, Until the Walls Come Down, is a story about the tangled roots of family and place and the power of unity. After a terrorist attack claimed the lives of her parents, Tamar receives devastating news. Her childhood home in Jaffa is slated for demolition. Pregnant and grieving, she throws herself into a legal battle to save the house, only to discover it once belonged to her Palestinian husband's family who fled during the War of 1947. We'll hear more of the story now from Gal.
Thank you, Hyla. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thanks, Katie and Thomas, for those wonderful readings. Now I'm measure up to that. I'm going to read from chapter 11. So we're kind of a little bit into the story. Our protagonist, Kamal, is married to Ali, who is Palestinian. She lost both her parents in a terrorist attack, and her two brothers sort of loaded off the sorting out the paperwork onto her. So she stays at the house in Jaffa, her childhood home, and she hears about a local exhibition and she decides to attend. She arrives at what looks like an abandoned building. The plaster is long peeled, and the bricks of the walls are exposed. The first floor's windows are bricked shut, and several signs proclaim the building dangerous. She smiles at the tall woman standing by the gate of the metal fence surrounding the building. Is this the exhibition? Yes. Hi, I'm Sarah. The woman replies in accent in Hebrew. Hi, I'm Tamal. The woman's handshake is confident but not too strong. Tamal likes her already. Hi, Tamal. Sarah's smile is welcoming. Come in. Is it Tamal glances warily in the building. Oh, yes, don't worry. We have an engineer's. We're actually raising money to renovate this building and turn it into a community. Who's we? Tamal asks. Sarah eyes her. We're all residents. This is going to be run by us for us. That sounds amazing, Kamal smiled. The collection jar is on the desk when you come out. How did you hear about us? Oh, I had a flyer in my post box. I live a few blocks from. Fantastic. I'm so glad to meet you. Salah's countenance swarms of fraction. There's a sign-up sheet as well if you want to join our group. We're only starting out, and there aren't very many of us. We'd love to have you. Of course. Kamal wonders how she'll fit activism into her already packed schedule, but she decides to worry about it later. She walks into the cool building. Several standing lamps are hooked to a snaking electricity cable that disappears through the door, providing the lighting. The exhibit is mostly old photos carefully taped to construction paper that act as a frame. Index cards bearing handwritten explanations are packed on forkboards next to some of the photos. The space reminds her of a poster hall at a teachers' development conference she attended a few years ago. She walks around, examines the photos. She recognizes some of the spots. It's a little like seeing pictures of her parents as young children. The buildings are familiar, but distinctly different from the pictures she has in her head. She looks around, reads the explanations thoroughly, and lingers when she feels her focus cloudy. She wants to learn everything they can teach her. One photo looks particularly familiar. She steps closer and recognizes the street her childhood home stands on. In fact, you can see the front of the house. A young man stands at the front doorway. The photo is old and not particularly clear, but something about the man's stance is also familiar. At first, she can't place it. She stares. She reads the explanation, but it's nothing she doesn't already know about the house or the street. She moves around the rest of the room, but her focus is gone. Her mind keeps coming back to that picture. Eventually, she gives up on the rest of the exhibit and returns to the picture of her house. This is where I live, she tells Salah, who left her post at the gate and wandered in. Really? Salah's face is friendly, but Kamal can tell how she feels. Do you know who this man is? She points. We didn't get permission from the family, so we didn't put it up on the plaque. The use of the word plaque is both endearing and baffling, but Kamal ignores it and looks expectantly at Salah, hoping she would tell her anyway. When Salah remains reticent, Kamal goes at it a different way. Where did you get the picture? My brothers are going to love it. She hopes the vague promise of more attendance and potential revenue will loosen Salah's tongue. Oh, I'm in touch with the family that used to live there. Really? That's amazing. I was just thinking that I should find them. What for? Salah is trying to align her suspicion with her hospitality. She's trying to stay friendly as she thwarts Kamal's attempts to extract information. I think it'll be good to see if they want to talk. Maybe we could invite them to visit the old house if they want. They feel very strongly about the house. Muhammad said they didn't sell. Salah covers her mouth when she realizes she'd let a name slip. But Kamal doesn't see how knowing a first name like Muhammad would ever help her in locating them. Is that Muhammad in the picture? She persists. No, that's his father, Fadi. Salah decides that first names are fine. This, though, more than anything, makes a bell ring in the back of Kamal's head. She still can't place it, but that combination of names means something. Look, she says, would you mind if I took a picture? It's just that this man looks so familiar. I just want to show it to my partner, Ali. And as if she invoked an incantation by saying his name, something clicks. She'd never met Ali's father. He took Ali's marriage to a Jewish girl as a betrayal of the worst kind and declared Ali dead. But she knows his name is Muhammad, and Fadi was Ali's grandfather, Muhammad's father. She goes back to the photograph. One look confirms her hypothesis. That man looks so familiar because he looks so much like Ali.
Thank you so much, Gal, for that reading and introducing us to the story. I'm particularly excited now because we have time for our audience Q&A. So for anyone who in the audience who has a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I will make sure they get asked. I know there's a lot happening in there, so looking forward to seeing what comes up, but we already have received some questions. This first question is for all three authors, and the question is, how did your personal experiences or background influence the themes of your book? I'm thinking we can go in reading order. So, Katie, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yes, that's easy. I lived every bit of it. So one of the struggles that I had in writing the book was, do I write it in first person and just, say this happened to me, this happened to me? And I chose not to do that because a lot of these microaggressions that I experienced in 30 years of being a priest, well, I'm still a priest, but I'm retired. So, they're embarrassing and they're humiliating. And I really didn't want to be so public about these things that had happened to me. So Irene came to the rescue and we read her story. But I lived every one of those experiences that are in the book, unfortunately.
Right, yeah. And that comment you made about, some of these things are so humiliating. It's this horrible, horrible irony of it, these things that are not your fault and perpetuated against you, but you can't help but hold that feeling. So I
Yes.
really understand that decision to go the quote unquote fictional route here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And what I discovered was that even though more women were being ordained in the Episcopal Church by the time I came along, what I discovered was that the struggle for power and control from the male clergy had not disappeared. It had just gone underground and morphed into guerrilla warfare. And I found so many people, as I've talked with people about the book, say, oh, that's happened to me too, in medicine or in education or in the corporate world or wherever, that a lot of people can resonate with the same kind of story, unfortunately. Yeah.
Right. It's persistent. Thomas, I'm also curious to hear from you. How did your personal experiences and your background influence the themes in your collection?
Well, I'm very much like Katie. I lived a lot of what's in the book. This story, this particular story, Angeline Smith was retiring, is certainly fiction. However, it reflects so much a part of my life that it's almost shameful to pretend otherwise. Um, I using this story as a model, and it's a little different from really all the other stories, so it's probably not the best example, but using it as an example, I told my high school classmates at our 40th reunion years ago that I was using all their names. And I have throughout my fiction, whenever I needed the name of a character, I just grabbed one of my old classmates' names and pulled a little bit of them into the story as well. And so the seven teachers in the story of Angeline Smith Was Retiring reflect real names of real teachers, I should say, even though this is a totally fictional situation that they're in. And I'm sure people from my old high school will catch it, people who are old will catch a lot of the names of, well, all the names of the teachers, particularly Angeline Smith, the title character. Um, uh, there's a building in her hometown named after her, so I'm sure people in her hometown will certainly recognize the name. So it reflects a great deal my high school, my teachers, and the situation that confronted not only my high school, but many, many high schools around the country during the period of the desegregation of schools. Uh, uh, Everybody knows about segregation of the schools, and we now live in the age of the integration. But in between was this period of desegregation, which was a turbulent time in education and in many cities. So it reflects the true to life experience of many people in many different schools, I suspect. But just to conclude, I would say um, uh, if there's one sneaky thing I did in the story. The name of the principal of the school, who comes in at the end, and you didn't hear that part, is actually the name. I gave him the last name of the actual school, which in the story is referred to as Dunbar. I don't know if anyone remembers the word we got from the autobiography of Malcolm X, where he comments that if you're a Black person and you ever go to a town and you're trying to find the Black area of town, the Black community, look up in the phone book, look up where the school system, and if there is a Lincoln school or a Dunbar school, that's where the Black neighborhood is. So that's how you find it. That's what Malcolm X or Alex Haley, writing the story of Malcolm X, said that a Black person was never lost in the town. If he could find Dunbar School or Lincoln School, he could find the Black community. And so the name of this school is generally is Dunbar. It's generic, but the actual school that's the model is named by it carries the name of the principal in the story. So I'll
Yeah, so pulling from all these various past experiences and background, and like you said, things that you've lived through to put together this collection, I think that really informs the level of detail and reality that goes into that work. And Gal, what about you? How did your personal experiences and your background influence the themes in your book?
Yeah, so obviously growing up in Israel, Palestine, informed a lot of the background. And my family story, which I discovered when I was doing, your year 6 family tree project. So it's a story I knew for a long time, that my grandparents on my dad's side came to Israel after the establishment of the state, from coming from a refugee camp in Germany after the World War II. And they brought everybody in and said, like, find yourself a place to live. And they did. They found an abandoned house and settled in. They found a nice big house with an inner courtyard. And they took one side, and their friends took the other 3 sides. And it took me years to realize that that was not an abandoned house, that was a Palestinian house. The house no longer stands there. But that kind of realizing that and connecting the dots with the people I know who are Palestinian, that kind of like opened up that avenue for me. Like, well, what if I knew the person whose house we settled, like my grandparents settled into, and that kind of started the seed of the story.
Yeah, I can imagine, that complete, it's like almost this discovery of history and contending with that. And I can imagine how close this story then is to you, because of you're drawing from, again, as all 3 of you have, from these personal experiences and expanding on them like that. And the whole sort of process of that is really fascinating to me. So thank you for sharing that with us. We have another question again for all 3 authors. This question is, if your readers were to take away just one feeling or idea from your book, what do you hope that it is? Maybe we can go in reverse order this time. So Gal, do you want to start us off this time?
Sure. I think this book, what I've been trying to do with this book is to give an alternative for the narrative of us versus them. There are no villains in the story, and that's on purpose. Everybody's just trying to live their lives, do the right thing. It's just really tough to know what the right thing is in complex context. So if I wanted the readers to take one thing, is that we have to have the difficult conversations. We have to look at the nuance and listen to the people, because everybody has a story.
Yeah, I like that you made that comment about you're not wanting there to be just like a black and white villain here. And I think that's so critical, especially with this kind of fiction. I think that's really what makes it so compelling, because it's not, it's not all fiction. I think for all of these stories, I think there is so much truth to them. That's what's important to remember as reading. Thomas, what about you? Is there one feeling or one idea that you hope readers take away from your book?
Well, it's hard to limit it to one, but I would say that one very powerful feeling, I think, is uh, the generational feeling. The stories in this book, many of them deal with with grief. There's grief there, and people are coming to terms with a grief, death of a father, or uh, other kinds of grief. But through that grief, they carry with them the glimmers of hope that come from a variety of sources, usually other people. But there's one story I think that sort of sums it up best: Yard Children. There's a kind of recognition that every generation carries previous generations on their shoulders. That history is not the past, that history lives in the present, in the decisions we make and how we handle grief and how we go forward. And there is strength in that. There is strength in knowing that there's another generation coming to take the torch, and that we have an obligation to that generation, just as we have an obligation to the previous generations to continue carrying the torch. I think there's a kind of generational impetus and a generational theme that we're all in this together, and history never goes away.
Yes, I think that's such an important thing to remember is history does not go away. It stays with us. And that's part of why reading narratives like this is so important. Katie, what about you? If there is a feeling or an idea you'd like readers to keep or take away from your book, what would that be?
Yes, very much. It actually, what I hope the readers take away from An Umbrella Made for a Man fits really nicely with both Gal and Thomas's sharings. In my work, I am absolutely driven to expose hypocrisy, injustice, a lack of fair play. So I will turn over the rocks that exist in our culture, our society, our psyche, and I'll investigate the grubs under the rocks and the darkness
Mhm.
under there and expose it, and then expose it to fresh air and sunshine so that all of that can be made clean and that we can be made clean. And what I hope that my readers will go away with always is that they will be filled with grace and hope and the acknowledgement that love is the strongest force of all the forces in the universe.
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's such an important thing to remember in order to uh, reconcile with such difficult realities, but also move forward. That's a critical detail of, it's important to remember, but also how are we going to proceed with that knowledge?
Exactly.
So thank you. I think that's a great perspective, Katie. We have one more question here, again, for all three writers. What is next for you? What's your next artistic project? Thomas, do you want to start us off with this one?
I do. I've got 2 volumes of poetry that want to see the light of day, and as soon as I can find a way to get them published, those 2 volumes, one's a large volume, the other's a shorter volume, and I have a third book, a little hard to explain, but it's very dear to my heart, and I'm submitting it around, and it's called the Book of Letters. It contains the letters that I received from 8 different former students and a friend, all of whom were writers in their youth and remain writers. A couple of them remain writers and became very famous writers, in fact. Um, but I have the letters from their youth when they were in college and just beginning to learn their crafts. And they would write me letters, and I have kept all their letters, and I have put those letters together from 8 different friends to get their letters to me over 40 years. And it's called a Book of Letters, and that's my next big project, hoping to get that out. That and the 2 volumes of poems.
Great. So something to look forward to, a new format. And I think that will be a very interesting project to dive into. Katie, what about you? What's your next project?
All right. Well, after all my talk about wanting Irene to tell the story instead of me telling the story, I now feel led to come out from behind my characters and share myself. So I'm envisioning a collection of vignettes from my life, memories that I have that are, some of them will be powerful and important to my development as a person. Others might be just kind of a little thing that happened, and just write about it and see what I've learned from those different things, what all of us can learn. And I'm really looking forward to it. One of the ones I want to write is about my trip to Costa Rica a couple of years ago. I ended up with COVID, and I was very, very sick, even though I was vaxxed to the max. And my travel agents didn't care. In fact, they instructed me not to tell the hotel that I had it, which was too late. I'd already told them. And they did not tell the rest of the people on the tour group that we'd had an outbreak, which I thought was criminally negligent myself. But it was the people of Costa Rica who got me through that week and got me home alive and well. So I think that'll make a really interesting piece to write about. So I'm so grateful to those people.
Yeah, it's almost like an homage that way. I think that would be a very fulfilling piece to write on your end, and also for the readers and the recipients almost. So something to look forward to there as well. And Gal, closing us out, what is next for you as a writer?
Yeah, so I'm very much focused on launching this book.
Yeah.
And so I haven't really started. I don't have something that is fully fleshed out. I am interested recently in the implications of work on identity and how that plays out, and how, especially now in the age of AI, how does that impact our perception of ourselves? That's what I'm interested in, and that next book may or may not be about that.
Yeah, so it's something that's kind of in development, and I think that's still very exciting to hear about, especially as that takes form and you see, what coalesces. So it sounds like there are great things on the horizon for all three of you, which is fantastic to hear, and I'll look forward to all of that. I'm sure your readers and people here as well will be on the lookout for those too. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much to all three of our authors for sharing these books with us, these projects. It was so wonderful to hear all three of you bring these texts to life. I think there's just something very special about that. And thank you, of course, to everybody in the audience as well for joining us to celebrate these wonderful authors together. Don't forget that you can order An Umbrella Made for a Man, Cora and Martha and Other Stories, and Until the Walls Come Down from the links in the chat. I'm putting those direct links in there one more time so you don't have to fish through the chat for them. Also, please consider checking out Atmosphere Press's website to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or of course, submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's it for today. So have a great rest of your week, everyone.